we keep on electing these leaders who, again, are operating as if it were 50 years ago, whether it's democracy, whether it's climate change. These are not the same Republicans. And actually, that is not my line. That is the line of Representative Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, who had this to say, gave me a little bit of hope, and I want to talk about it. But she was on CNN this morning discussing Joe Manchin's lack of support for H.R. 1, this sort of overhaul of voting rights.
Well, I think that when we talk about opposition to H.R. 1 being just about voting rights, we aren't telling the entire story. H.R. 1 has sweeping lobbying reforms, and I believe that, we have the influence of big money that impacts not just one party, but both parties in the United States Congress. And I do believe that that old way of politics has absolutely an influence in Joe Manchin's thinking and the way he navigates the body. I mean, the things that he cites, like this, I think, romanticism of a bipartisanship is about an era of Republicans that simply do not exist anymore. And I also believe that that the opposition to big money and dark money, you have the Koch brothers and associated organizations from the Koch brothers really doing victory laps about Joe Manchin's opposition to the filibuster. I think that it's pretty open that these groups exert a lot of influence, as much influence as they can on members of Congress. And I think that that the older school way of accepting the role of lobbyists in Washington absolutely has a role in Joe Manchin's thinking.
She's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It works that way when it comes to the money. And then when it comes to politicians that have to play that game, of course, yes, it's the donations that happen. But they truly are afraid of, if they flip, the whole point about this conversation is trying to convince Manchin or Sinema to flip the filibuster and make sure that it's, we're going by this whole thing of, majority of voting. You mean the majority of people that vote, then that's where the law goes? It's crazy how that works. We're trying to go back to that weird thing that Americans were supposed to do. But they're afraid that if they do this, then suddenly when the Republicans get back in power, they're just going to steamroll you. That's the worry, and that's the constant thing that gets pitched to people to go, well, let's make sure we keep this in place because, when we lose, we're going to go ahead and now all these things are going to get put on us the Republicans do. Hey,
they know they're losers. It's almost like they know.
Yeah,
also, they know it's coming.
We're preserving the filibuster to keep that from happening when it happens any motherfucking way. So what we have is when people like Trump come in and change things and strip people of their rights, destroy our alliances around the world, this Iran nuclear deal that he was talking about from the very beginning, and how he ripped up those papers, and then things actually got worse under it because of his decisions with that. If you push things 50% to the right, then Democrats come in and say, we're going to come and change everything. And then they push things 10% back to the left.
Right.
We've still gone 40% to the right. And it happens every cycle of this, from the Democrat to Republican office, then Democrat to Republican office. Next, we've gone 200% one way and only 25% back to the left. And we're concerned about it going too far to the right. It happens every time. We don't know that that's how balance works. If you don't get your things done and they get 90% of their things done, guess who keeps winning?
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
It's getting to the point, too, where Manchin really can't even speak to it in a way that exonerates him at all, because McConnell is out here saying in no uncertain terms, explicitly, it is my number one goal. It is what we will accomplish is striking down everything the Biden administration wants to do. He has said this. Yeah. So why should I believe you when you say, well, you don't see the bipartisan efforts that are going on behind the scenes. You don't know the hope that I have going forward. This dude is out here saying, absolutely not. Mark my words. I will not work with this administration. I will not move their plans forward. And you're saying otherwise? What's the deal? So now it's whenever he's questioned about it, I think Chris Cuomo actually did a pretty good interview with him several weeks ago where he was just pretty much in no uncertain terms being what you're saying is bullshit. Because it is.
Well, and AOC, I think, is really naming, look, she's doing something that no other Democrat I've seen do, which is call Manchin out on his shit. Call him. Everyone is so afraid to call him out on his shit, and she's doing it, which I think is really important. It's important to like create rifts within the Democratic Party and push the Democratic Party and not be so scared. And she's naming it, and she's saying, look, she said it with Biden. Look, if we were in a European country, Biden and I wouldn't even be in the same party because he's so far to the center. We don't have the same politics. And I think it's really important to say, look, there is a new Democratic Party that is trying to birth itself. It's trying to bring the Democratic Party back to the party of FDR, truly, and get into the 21st century and survive the 21st century, mind you. And then there's people who just want to go along with, whatever lobbyists say because they're afraid. And this is the thing with Jayar, you're saying like, yeah, one, you're afraid of getting pummeled. Well, too late. You've been pummeled. Number two, are you afraid of being outspent? Like, what are you actually? You've been outspent. The dark money groups, 9 out of 10 are going to efforts that do not support things that you're trying to put forward. They don't want voting rights. And specifically in HR1, like she was saying, there is a significant rollback of dark money. So, I mean, she sort of skirted around it, but she should just basically say, who's funding Manchin? Who are you funding? Who's funding you? Who's behind you? Because this is where we need to go. I love my silver fox in the Senate, Sheldon Whitehouse, who has like just a wonderful presentation about dark money groups. And like, pretty much anytime a congressperson says dark money, I'm like, I'm listening, because like, I love Jane Mayer and her book Dark Money, and that shit blew my mind. So I'm glad there's someone who's willing to fight. I hope there are more people who are going to fight for this. But yeah, it's been a rough week. That being said, Merrick Garland, he did give a speech and he said he was going to prioritize voting rights. But it's hard to imagine how, if you've got all of these bills rolling through, I mean, I guess through the courts, right? Or like, I don't know, are there any federal judges that haven't been appointed by Bush or Trump?
These are those glaring differences between the two parties. So Merrick Garland will say, hey, I'm looking to prioritize voting rights, and doesn't give any specifics. Meanwhile, across the country, in all these states, these governors and these state politicians in Republican states are saying, we're going to prioritize limiting voting. They're putting together very specific and detailed bills to make sure that shit happens. While Merrick Garland's like, I have this idea of maybe I'm going to do something about it at some point. I'm going to prioritize it. What does that mean? One side is doing something, another side is saying what they want to do. Yeah.
Be specific. Tell us what is unconstitutional and that you're looking into. Give us some kind of faith. Any last thoughts?
I just wanted to speak to something that Jayar said earlier, which is that you've always been confident that he was never going to prison or to be held accountable for anything that he's done. I think I've been scared to vocalize that because I want to sort of speak into the atmosphere like it's going to happen, but it's never going to happen and especially in Manhattan, there's a really important Manhattan DA race coming up. If people aren't aware, then I would just like to, we got to obviously Cyrus Vance is not running again, but Trump is never being held accountable by him. He's let his children off before. Or someone like him. And there's a slew of really great progressive candidates for Manhattan DA. I'm personally supporting Eliza Orlins. I think it rocks that she's a public defender running for that office. So it's just, I feel like there's an election coming up that can fully revolutionize like that ideology, because you're right. It's never happening with someone like Cy Vance. And, I just hope that people turn out for elections like that, because there's not as much fanfare about it, but they are just as important, if not more. So, Tahani
Abushi, who is also running, she's a Palestinian Muslim, just endorsed by Bernie Sanders. Very cool. But and obviously, goddamn, the mayoral race in Manhattan is very, very big. I'm like, I feel like the only way you hold a crook accountable and like a mafioso is through their taxes. So that's where I'm like, whether it's SDNY or what's the other one? The other NY one. Like if there's a tax, like if it's through taxes that we hold Trump accountable, however it is, but that's him personally. That's his, if he could run again, his personal finances, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. As much as I want to see him, you know, sort of like die in a, you know, a dirty shroud of whatever, just like a very like a Wicked Witch of the West kind of melting situation. I'm also concerned with all the things that he broke in DC and all the people that helped him break it, right? And so to JR's point about, yeah, Rumsfeld and Ashcroft and Bush and Cheney, what are they just had to go away for a while to their ranch and paint. And then they could come back into the limelight, you know, and be fine. And look pretty damn good. I mean, not from us, but
yes,
the paintings are okay.
They're fine. I've seen 6th graders do the same shit. It's so true. Like, honestly, I don't even consider myself an artist, and I know I drew a Sonic the Hedgehog picture in high school that could, you can hang it up on a wall too, 100%.
Hey, thanks so much for watching the Bitchuation Room podcast live stream. And while you're here, why don't you just subscribe to this channel? I promise it'll be good.